It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Let's start with the Rittenhouse trial. No verdict yet. Everyone's waiting for the inevitable. It's going to be decided. If he's found guilty, we know that the right will make him a martyr and a hero and all of that stuff. He'll be the most popular guy in prison for about 15 minutes until they forget his name. And if he's found not guilty, the left, well, they're going to claim white privilege and there's going to be anger. It's going to be all kinds of stuff. So going to be interesting to see the fallout regardless of the decision. Now, if the judge jumps in the middle, which who knows, will both sides be unhappy or who knows? Now, the prosecution not helping itself. The big story today was the grainy video. They should have sent the clear one. They should have done something. Now, the prosecution's argument was that, well, you know, it was a lower quality video because of the transfer process. I guess they did it over a cell phone from an iPhone to an Android or whichever. And in the transfer process, you got a lower quality video. And this is where the defense should have gone, no, we want the original, please. Not just for the ease of, hey, I'll send it to you, but demand the original video. Now they've asked for a mistrial without prejudice, which I guess originally they had asked for with prejudice, which means he couldn't be retried. This time, I guess, without prejudice, which means that they can try him again, which kind of tells me, I don't know that the defense is feeling overly comfortable with where they are. Because I'll tell you, I thought for a little bit that the defense was pretty comfortable because, look, at the end of it, even I think in that split second, if you're just looking at the split second, where he shot the two people, you could make the argument that in that frame, in that little bit of time, that yes, it was self-defense. But when you come back to and you put it all into perspective, and as I said from the beginning, here's a kid who said he was going to stop the violence. And if that meant taking his AR-15 and using violence to stop the violence, that was his thing, and that was the pushback. We're gonna protect the property, and we're gonna guard the city. We're basically going to be self-deputized law enforcement people. And that's what they went there to do. Now, just because there were some pictures of him, scrubbing some graffiti off the wall, give him credit for that. Good on you. But at the end of the day, you picked up the AR-15, you walked into the street, and chaos happened. And it takes me back to something, a friend of mine who was a policeman for years said, he goes, look, at the end of the day, if you have a gun, and you pull a gun, you damn well better be ready to use it because, in his position, he said, as a policeman, overwhelmingly, the number of policemen killed on the job because of a gun, like 2/3 of the time is with their own gun because it's in the mix. People take it out of their holster. People take it off of them. And this is my problem with everybody having a gun. Not good. Also, the judge got a little complaining in today, and good for him. Complaining about the media. This time he says he's going to think long and hard about allowing cameras back into any courtroom of his. And look, this is what pundits do. This is part of where we're at. My problem with this is, why is the judge watching the coverage? Why is the judge even caring? He's telling the jurors don't pay attention to the trial, but he's got the rabbit ears. Very, very strange. So day 2 of the deliberations over. We'll find out if tomorrow brings any verdict, and then wait for the fallout that's going to come with that. Speaking of judges, speaking of trials, the QAnon shaman, he was sentenced today. He's going to get 41 months. Prosecution asked for 51. This is going to be equal to the most lengthy sentence. Him and the guy from New Jersey, that Fairlame guy, he got 41 months as well. He was the martial arts fighter who pled guilty to assaulting a police officer during the insurrection. They're both going to get them. And look, I still love the fact that the guy who's the head of the Proud Boys, the big white supremacist, not doing well in prison, crying that it's bad in here. Send me home, please. Maybe should have thought of that. Now, Jacob Chansley, that's his name, the QAnon shaman, did all of the backpedaling you would expect, and then some. I mean, you made up some quotes of, Clarence Thomas, Max Dupree, had a whole bunch of, this was well thought out. Give him credit. Took responsibility, to ask the judge to look deep in his soul because he's not the person that he was. He's grown beyond that. He's no longer a believer in the QAnon conspiracy theory. Doing everything he could do, even reference the Bible. Had to do that. The judge gave him 41 months. Should be interesting to see that plays out. So good for him. I'm hoping for lengthier sentences for the criminals yet to come. But I guess not a bad sign. 41 months. Could have been longer. Me from the beginning, 41 months should have been for the first person. And that would have gotten everybody else in line. Here, speaking also of judges, a lot of judge stories today. And this is what happens when you have interesting judges on the court. A federal judge in Montgomery, Alabama, not happy with the American Rescue Plan that Joe Biden passed at the beginning of the year. Now, the part of this that's interesting, and I talked about this when it passed, that I was happy by the fact that states would have to use the pandemic money for pandemic stuff. To help people. Ohio was one of the first states to go, no, we're going to take that pandemic money and we're going to give it out in tax breaks to corporations. That's what we're going to do because that's how we can best spend emergency pandemic money by handing it out to rich people. And I remember losing my ever-loving freaking mind at the time going, no, that's not what it's for. Evidently, U.S. District Judge L. Scott Kugler ruled Monday that Congress had exceeded its power in putting this tax mandate on the states. And I'm going, hold on, wait a second. Whoa, tax mandate? I'm kind of confused. The Congress has the power of the purse. This is how the system works. They hold the purse. It's like when my wife I ask her for money, and I say, hey, I'm going to go buy milk and bread. Instead, I go to the strip club. Do you think the purse is going to have a problem with that? And the answer, yes. and it's one of these things where you go, I'm sorry, you were supposed to buy the milk and bread, not the other thing. It's very, very bizarre that this judge would claim that the tax cut restriction was a, quote, federal invasion of state sovereignty that was unconstitutionally ambiguous, leaving states guessing as to whether their tax cuts would trigger a repayment of federal funds. Yes, it would. If you're handing it out to corporate America, if you're handing it out to rich people, yes, that's not what it was for. What was the money for? And again, this is my problem with block grants. This is my problem with a lot of the things that Republicans want to do with tax dollars. No, we're going to give it to the states and let the states decide. Well, here's what the states have been deciding. We're going to give it to rich people. We're going to give it to corporate America. We're going to give it out in tax breaks. Instead of going, no, maybe we need to use that money a little bit more efficiently, a little bit better, and to do the things that Congress demanded you do. Oh, I don't know, like deal with pandemic relief. Maybe put it towards your unemployment compensation programs, which have been woefully underfunded in states all across this country. That's what it was meant for, not to make rich people richer. So again, I find it very ironic that another judge, another character of a judge, making another bad decision. And speaking of a character, speaking of crazy, the former guy back in the news. It's amazing how much press the former guy gets, even without his Twitter account. He has this Save America PAC, and he sends out emails every once in a while. This one excoriating Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. Yeah, he's at it again. Called Mitch old, broken crow. Anyway, he issued this statement. Ultimatum. He said Mitch McConnell is a fool, and he damn well better stop there, the Democrats, dream of communism bill, and keep his senators in line, or he should resign now. Something he should have done a long time ago. Use the debt ceiling like it should have been used. You old broken crow. To do so would hurt our country far less than this horrible bill. Old broken crow. To which Mitch McConnell said, no, I kind of like the old crow whiskey guy. He brought up Henry Clay as his favorite senator, which he happened to like that old crow whiskey. I find it interesting that, Trump is going after him because, well, what the plan was to hold the country hostage over the debt ceiling, which, again, we're coming up to again really soon. And that's the reason that this is coming out. Right before Christmas, we could have a government shutdown. We could have, again, more meltdowns because Republicans use the debt ceiling as a weapon when you have a Democratic president. Nobody used it against Trump except for Trump and the Republicans. What's interesting is, to me, the debt ceiling shouldn't even be. It's like saying, I've already spent all the money. I've run my credit card up, and I'm just not going to pay it. When the time to argue about money is when you go to spend it. Back when you had these appropriation bills, when Trump was running up multi-trillion-dollar deficits during his term, maybe we should have argued a little bit harder. But no, Republicans were all in favor of spend, borrow and spend. Borrow and spend, borrow and spend. And they do that quite well. And what do they spend it on? Tax cuts for rich people and corporations, taking us back to the American Rescue Plan. That money was not meant for them. Now, McConnell, responded, kind of jokingly. But at the end of the day, the Republican Party is in full-throated support of Trump at this point. You got this Dan Bishop, a Republican from North Carolina, who you may remember filed a motion to boot New York Representative John Katko out of his place as the ranking Republican on the Homeland Security Committee. Because he had the audacity to do what? Vote for roads and bridges. And in New York, where he's from, need it desperately. This is one of those things where you as a Republican in New York, you don't vote against this because they desperately need the money. And there were 12 other Republicans who, evidently Trump and the other GOP folks are really mad at, and they face some repercussions as well. Now, Trump went on even further against Mitch McConnell. He goes, this was all allowed by Mitch McConnell. He's talking about the rescue plan and the infrastructure plan. By Mitch McConnell's incompetence, and now I understand that a couple of Republican senators may get on board so that they can have yet another and even bigger victory for the Democrats, while at the same time ensuring massive inflation and destruction of our country as we know it. There he's talking about the Build Back Better plan. There could be a victory for the Democrats, and all costs can't have that. And what's he talking about? Why it can't be passed? Because why would we want health care for our citizens? Why would we want child care for our children? Why would we want education for those children? Why would we want to invest in our seniors? Why would we want to do anything to help people? No, because it would be a win for Democrats, and that'd be bad. Now, this idiotic idea that it would cause massive inflation is simply wrong. It would take us in the other direction, but facts have never mattered to the Orange Menace. And destroy our country as we knew it? Yeah, you did that for 4 years. He went on to say Mitch McConnell couldn't stop the first bill, so 19 senators, including himself, joined in. That's what he does. If you can't beat them, join him, Trump whined. If he wasn't so stupid and didn't give the 2-month extension, we could have stopped it all. Now he and his rhino friends will allow a much bigger and far worse bill to pass, ruining our country while giving Democrats a great political lift all at the same time. Now, this is a guy who wants to be president again. The interesting, he's a fool and he's stupid. Yeah, those are such I'm sitting here and I'm reading this, and I'm thinking, Van Jones, tonight he's presidential. Is this presidential? Does this rise to what is the new presidential? And the answer clearly no. Now we need the Build Back Better plan. We got, of the three-legged stool, we got two of the legs. We got the rescue plan and we got the infrastructure bill. Needed both of those. Need the Build Back Better Act. That's the other component that this is the other part of the investment in the country's future. I want the bill to be much chunkier than what it is, but it is a start. It's going to help people make it through the next couple of years. It's going to make some investments in things that we've all wanted for a long time, and it's going to lower costs, which means that, some of the inflation that's been going on in healthcare, some of the inflation that's been going on in housing, some of the inflation that's been going on in energy, some of that stuff's going to come down, which means working families going to have more money. The fact that they want to invest some money in building low-cost housing, like they did back in the 40s and 50s, so people had somewhere to live, that to me is really important, because it's going to give young families an opportunity to buy starter homes, because nobody's building those anymore. When was the last time you saw a 1,000 square foot house built? They don't do it anymore. We're still building McMansions, and people going into Deepak if they can. They're saying, look, we're gonna invest in affordable, low-cost housing and give people the opportunity to build wealth and do the things that past generations have done, and we're going to use some government money to do it as we did in the past. And that's the part that I think most people forget. We've been sold this illusion that the country was a capitalist paradise, that the invisible hand ruled all of this success, when the reality is there was a lot of planning that went into it. There was a lot of policy that went into it, a lot of investment. And investment means taxing rich people. Not going, hey, take that pandemic money that was used. We meant, to help you keep your citizens, in their homes by, maybe shoring up their unemployment. We didn't mean for you to go and hand it out like candy to rich people and to corporations. This is something we should all be furious about. But, we're still in our silos, man. We're in our silos. Scary stuff. But we got lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to take a quick break. On the other side, a little bit more about the Build Back Better plan and some thoughts there. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1785. That was the day the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York was founded. 22 skilled craftsmen with the motto, "By hammer in hand, all arts do stand," met on Pine Street to form a benevolent organization that could provide culture, education, and social services to craftsmen and their families. 2 months later, founders met for their annual meeting. They represented many of the city's trades, including hatters, butchers, sailmakers, bolters, and comb makers. In his book, Chance Democratic, historian Sean Willett states, the General Society was intended to be a semi-political umbrella organization for all of the city's independent mechanics, to help oversee the trades and secure favorable legislation from local and national government. The group captured the ideal of mutuality and craft pride essential to artisan fraternities since the Middle Ages. The General Society opened one of the city's first free schools at a time when there were no public schools. It established a tuition-free Mechanics Institute, the General Society Library, and lecture series. The Mechanics Institute, founded in 1858, continues to provide free evening trades-related instruction. The library, established in 1820, is the second oldest library in New York City. It is also one of the few remaining membership-circulated libraries. Its collections and archives span 2 centuries. The General Society continues its tradition of public lectures in the form of the Labor, Literature, and Landmark series. More recently, it has added the Artesian Lecture series that features lectures by master artisans. The series also promotes the work and art of skilled craftsmen. The General Society has been at its current location at 20 West 44th Street since 1885.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So over the next several days, we're going to hear a lot about the Build Back Better Act. Look, this is good policy. It's a step in the right direction. As I said from the beginning, I don't think it's enough, but you get what you can. You take the win, and you continue to organize to move forward. And as I understand, on Thursday, a number of groups aligned with the Blue Green Alliance are going to hold a press conference and talk about why this is so important. The Steelworkers, the Sierra Club, the Painters Union, a bunch of folks going to say, look, this is good for the country. It's good for our members and our friends, but it's good for all of us. And here to share some thoughts on what exactly is in this Build Back Better that's going to make lives much better. I've asked Jason Walsh to come talk with us. Jason is the executive director of the Blue Green Alliance. Jason, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So walk me through this. Having this big press conference on Thursday, what's the pitch?
The pitch is that people have been talking about the Build Back Better Act as a social policy bill, as a safety net bill, as a human infrastructure bill. We want to talk about it first and foremost as a jobs bill. And we're going to be releasing some new jobs analysis of some of the major investments of the Build Back Better Act. And we're going to be talking about what that means for workers, for job quality, for cleaner air and water, and for building an economy that works for more people, which we need to do.
Yeah, I've been saying I look at this as kind of a reset of the last 40 years of bad policy, neoliberal trade policies and supply side voodoo Reaganomics, all kind of balled into one. This is kind of a little bit of a reset, not as big as I would like, but it's a little bit.
Yeah. And I would say it's a really big reset in a couple of different ways. So I'll give you an example. Probably the biggest job creator for solar and wind jobs over the last 10 years has been clean energy tax credits. They have never included the kind of job quality labor standards, right, that other federal investments have historically included. Principal ones being prevailing wage on the construction side and Buy America on the manufacturing side. Both of those are now included in clean energy tax credits to the tune of $320 billion over 10 years. So not only are we going to create a whole bunch of jobs, we're going to lift job quality and job access in these sectors as a whole, which is going to be fundamentally important.
No, that's an extremely important point. It's one of those things that I've been talking about for a while, that they were able to keep prevailing wage in this, even though Tom Coburn and some Republicans did do their diligence to try and strip it out. It's still right there, though.
Yeah, we've got it in. There's also some really exciting provisions that will incent the purchase of union-made, American-made electric vehicles. I think most of your listeners know we're kind of at this pretty historic inflection point in terms of the future of the automotive industry in this country, right? Where it's not a question of whether we're going to shift to electric vehicles. It's a question of
how fast,
when, and who, and where are they going to be made, and what are the quality of jobs, and who benefits, right? And we think the policies in the Build Back Better Act, in particular, a bonus for a consumer. It's basically it's a consumer tax credit where you get extra money if you buy an electric vehicle that is union made and American made. And It's exactly those kind of policies we think that are going to drive the clean energy economy in a high road direction.
Yeah, boy, I wish they would have included that back in 2009 and 2010 when they were incentivizing solar panels. Because when we put our panels on our house, they're Chinese-made solar panels. There was no choice on where you're going to get them from the dealers. I wish there was this kind of provision in place back then, because there's no question that I would have bought the American-made panels. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and to be clear, not only are there Buy America incentives on tax incentives for the deployment of solar and wind and other renewables, but there are also tax credits to support standing up the manufacturing of those components here in the United States. So solar cells, wafers, inverters, trackers, we want those American made, we want them union made.
No, but again, this sounds like common sense stuff that should have been in all of our bills. This is the kind of when I listen to my Republican friends talk about America First, this is the kind of stuff that I go, yeah, this. If you're talking about this, I'm there with you.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think it's based on a recognition that the American people, whether they're Republican or Democratic or independent, whatever, they are only going to embrace this transition to a clean energy economy if they see real economic gains, right? Working people in this country have to see those gains. And for too long, we have relied on unreliable global supply chains in which this stuff is made under conditions that don't meet any reasonable standard of human rights, of worker rights, of environmental protection. And Build Back Better basically shifts that completely.
Yeah. Now, you guys, your organization is a kind of a coming together of the steelworkers and the Sierra Club, right? That's kind of your thing.
Those are our founders. Leo Gerard, president of Steelworkers. Carl Pope, director of the Sierra Club. Our founding principle, still our guiding principle, which is this belief that we shouldn't have to choose between good jobs and a clean environment. That we can and have to have both. And I have to say, this is probably the most pivotal point in the history of BGA where we can actually put that principle into practice.
Right. That's where I was going.
Policy.
I was going there saying, look, this is the steel workers who people are like, oh, dirty steel, and the environmentalists who people say, well, we shouldn't have any of this, coming together and going, no, we can have an environment, we can have a clean environment, and we can still have good jobs, and we can still manufacture things, and we can do it here if we had the right policy. And that's right where I was going. Is this that bill? Is this the one that you guys have been working on throughout your entire existence?
Yeah, this is that bill, and let's be clear. I mean, if you talk to your average steelworker, rank and file member, they don't see themselves in this clean economy, right? Because we haven't done these things to date, and we can't expect those rank and filers, to embrace this transformation unless they're getting the jobs, unless they're making this stuff.
Exactly, because
they see themselves in this.
Because the steelworkers, I go back to the 80s, how the steelworkers that I knew were basically thrown to the side when trade policies or when, we allowed more steel to come into the country. People are a little change scares people because we've left people behind. For me, this bill helps us move in the right direction while trying not to leave people behind and saying we're going to make the next industry and what's coming next just as good as what we're leaving behind. And I think that's the important component here.
That's right. And it really embraces something that for too long our elected officials have run away from, which is this notion that you can actually use industrial policy to shape an economy in a way that benefits workers and community.
Yeah, but outside of just the climate stuff, because there's a little bit in this, right? I mean, there's probably a lot of climate stuff in this, which is why there are people pointing at Joe Manchin saying that he's the reason that this is being holed up. And I guess that should be another question I should ask. What are the chances of Manchin getting on board with this?
We think at the end of the day he's gonna vote for this because it's good for West Virginia.
You would hope.
And I'll and let me put a finer point on that, right? I mean, I would say to date that that the people of West Virginia have experienced more of the economic pain as opposed to the economic gain of this transition, right? They've seen a lot of coal economy jobs lost, mostly because of an economic shift in the power sector to using natural gas. But you know, we could talk about that, right? But where they have lagged is both in terms of investment in clean energy, right? They've got like less than a gigawatt of solar and wind in the whole state. That's anemic. But also investments in critical infrastructure, you know, lead service line replacement, mass transit, you know, all of these things, broadband, and legislation like the Build Back Better Act, legislation like the just passed infrastructure bill. That's the kind of investment they need to actually bring their state and bring their people into, you know, into a more hopeful future. And I think at the end of the day, we hope Senator Manchin recognizes that and will vote for this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I look at Biden's plan as like, you know, the three-legged stool. You had the rescue plan right out of the gate that helped us get through that period. You now have this bipartisan infrastructure bill that should have passed, you know, months ago, and also this Build Back Better plan to kind of reset and provide a little bit of social safety net, as well as dealing with some of our climate issues. I think you have to have all three in order for this thing to work.
That's right, and there's a bunch of stuff in there that we haven't worked as much on, but which I think is just as important to your listeners and to me personally, right? Investments in affordable housing and childcare, you know, in the care economy, which is critically important for our labor partners like SEIU and AFT. You know, we need to create a resilient economy that is prepared to respond to, you know, disasters, whether those are pandemics or climate disasters, and that primarily means investing in workers.
Yeah. Now, the former president today called all of this stuff the dream of communism bill. You know, this is the part that's just kind of interesting to me, that what we're talking about, the investments that we're talking about in doing something about climate change, and helping Granny stay in her home a little bit longer, and doing some of the things around education and healthcare. The opponents of it are, you know, going to the most extreme measures of it's creeping socialism. You know, Trump saying it's the dream of communism bill, all meant to scare people to not pay attention to what's actually in it. Because when you start talking to people about what's actually in it, people are like, yeah, why haven't we done that already?
Yeah. I mean, you know, it is extreme, and it's frankly ridiculous, and it's interesting coming from someone who promised for 4 years to pass an infrastructure bill, never did. Now President Biden and Congress have passed that, and now we're moving on to the Build Back Better Act.
So, out of this press conference that you're going to have on Thursday, what's the hope? What's the hope that comes out of this?
We need the House of Representatives to pass the Build Back Better Act. We need them to. It's ready to go. We need it to be voted on either as soon as this weekend or certainly before the Thanksgiving break next week. We need to pass it, and then we need to send it to the Senate. Senate needs to pass it and send it to the president's desk.
Now, the Senate's where the problem is going to be. I think it will pass the House. No.
I think it will. That we don't have big margins in either chamber, but we got a few more votes in the House. But at the end of the day, in the Senate, every Democrat is going to have to vote for it.
Is there going to be a Republican that votes for it? Anyone? Do you think? Because Trump seems to think, and there's no proof of this, but the former guy seems to think that because of Mitch McConnell's ineffective leadership, that there will be Republicans voting for it. Do you see that?
No, I don't. I wish I could give you a different answer, but I think it's Democrats who are going to have to pass this thing.
And that's the thing that bugs me, because this is the kind of stuff that is going to make people's lives better. And when you do the messaging around how it's going to make people's lives better, I think people take to it. Is that your experience? The more you let people know what's in it, that people come around to it.
Oh, I mean, we've done polling in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, and Michigan. I mean, independents, Democrats, Republicans. And we've actually tested a bunch of, in plain English, a bunch of the provisions of this, like the manufacturing provisions, and we see support up to 90%, right? And this is, with voter samples that include equal numbers of Trump voters and Biden voters. So, what you're hearing on Fox News, what you're hearing from the former president is a bunch of spin that bears no relation to the actual legislation that is being voted on. But look, it is an unapologetically pro-union piece of legislation. And on that basis alone, unfortunately, given the state of the Republican Party these days, every Republican senator, I think, is going to vote against it.
And that's so weird. I mean, the reality is, and we're about the same age probably. I remember when there used to be Republicans who didn't vehemently hate unions or viscerally hate unions like we see now, that there were, a large number of pro-union Republicans, and they're just not there anymore.
No, they're a handful, and some of them showed up in I think in a very brave way to vote for the infrastructure bill. You now see what they're having to deal with, from death threats to threats of being expelled from committees by their Republican colleagues. It's actually pretty scary.
Yeah, we live in crazy times when you're talking about death threats over making the roads and the bridges better. I mean, the bipartisan infrastructure bill was the easy one. That's the thing that everybody wants. Everybody wants to go over a bridge and not have to worry about ending up in the drink. Nobody wants potholes. We want the lead pipes removed. All of the stuff in the hard infrastructure bill, nobody's against. It's crazy that these guys be getting death threats, but hey, like the former guy said, you gave the Democrats a win, and that's sadly where this is at. Last question. What can we do to help? What's the marching order going forward?
Your listeners should ask your elected representatives in the House and in the Senate to vote for the Build Back Better Act, and vote for building an economy that is cleaner and stronger and more equitable and more union.
Any specific targets you got in mind?
Oh, I would certainly like your listeners in West Virginia to be communicating with Senator Manchin, but I think it's in the House we've got a handful of targets. I won't name them here, but I think the best message we can leave your listeners with is contact your representatives right now.
There you go.
This is the time to do it.
Good stuff, Jason. I appreciate the time. Keep up the great work, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Thank you, Rick. I'd love to.
Thanks so much. Jason Walsh, Executive Director of the Blue Green Alliance. We'll get links out on how you can check out their website, bluegreenalliance.org. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1747. That was the day that a crowd of Boston workers took British officers as hostages and held them for 3 days. The workers were outraged that fellow Bostonians had been pressed into service on British Navy ships against their will. Impressing ship crews was one of the ways the British manned their ships when there were not enough willing crew members. The seaport at Boston had become so notorious for this kind of worker kidnapping that other merchant vessels had begun to avoid the area for fear that their crews might be taken by the British Navy. Bostonians became increasingly vocal against the practice and worried about its impact on the local economy. In 1745, the local selectmen petitioned for, quote, immediate relief from impressment. They wrote that it was a matter that, quote, nearly affects the liberties of the people and is a great insult upon this government. 2 years later, Commodore Charles Knowles sailed into Boston on his way to the West Indies. While he resupplied and refit his ships, some of his crew members escaped from service. To make up his diminished crew, on November 16th, Knowles ordered local workers to be rounded up as replacements. Fed up, Bostonians detained members of the British fleet, including one of Knowles' lieutenants. The Massachusetts governor, William Shirley, was able to persuade Knowles not to retaliate. He helped to facilitate an exchange, the impressed Bostonians for the British hostages. That January, a young Samuel Adams founded the newspaper The Independent Advertiser, published to defend the rights and liberties of mankind. The paper commended the mob for standing up to impressment. Samuel Adams would go on to become a leader in the American Revolution. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, as I've been saying for the longest time, Democrats need to get out in the streets. And as we've been calling for here in Striketober and Strikesgiving and hopefully into Strike Christmas or whatever we're going to come up for there, is to get Democratic representatives, to get politicians out on these picket lines, to get people out on these picket lines adopting a striker. Walk with them, talk with them, listen to what's going on. As I said, a master's class in working class economics. This is how Democrats need, well, to regain their working class roots and get people to vote for them. This is how you do it. It's how they did it in the past. All the other stuff, the culture stuff, secondary. We need to get back to the roots. And I'm so thrilled to see my next guest actually wrote a piece on this titled America Needs Help, Yet Democrats Are Getting Sucked into Fake Culture Wars. That's why I've asked Hamilton Nolan to come talk with us. Hamilton is a reporter, labor reporter over at In These Times magazine. Hamilton, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me. Love to be on your show anytime, man.
So I'm reading this story and that you wrote, and fantastic work, by the way. You point out what I've been saying for the longest time. Our public transportation sucks. We got a broken healthcare system that costs too much. Our environment is in trouble. The climate's in trouble. We got real problems, and yet every election cycle, we get sucked into some kind of nonsense that affects virtually nobody, but that's the center of it. This critical race theory thing in Virginia that they don't even teach. This is what turned an entire election of people who are struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah, it's, I mean, we need to first of all recognize that these things are not real issues. I mean, the Democratic Party is making a mistake. As soon as you even start arguing about these issues, you've already made a mistake because, you know, people need to recognize these are not real issues. And everybody knows what real issues are. You know, the things that you just named. I mean, all you have to do is walk around your town where you live. I mean, people need health care. People need higher wages. We know that climate change is an issue. We know there's poverty and homelessness. We know what the real issues are. And when we get sucked into these culture wars, it takes all the oxygen out of the room. And it doesn't take a genius right now to look ahead, not only to the midterms in 2022, but to 2024 and see that those elections are going to be contested on these culture war issues unless something changes.
Because it's all they've got. They've got nothing else. And I love the way you put it in the article. Common sense tells us we should spend most of our time talking about the bigger problems, the biggest problems, and less time on the lesser problems, and no time on the mythical problems. That to me is perfectly put.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, when you're a journalist and you're part of the media, I mean, hopefully you follow these things maybe a little closer than the average person. So it can be frustrating to see these kind of issues come up again and again. But, you know, all of us that lived through the 90s lived through the era of flag burning was the biggest issue, and gay marriage, gays in the military. And, you know, we've seen this before. Political correctness. I mean, none of this is new. It's the same playbook coming out again. So again, like really the people in leadership need to be smart enough to offer the voters an alternative vision and something they can hang on to that's not just this red meat bullshit.
Yeah, this is why I've said this a number of times on the show. On election night 2020, I was out on a picket line, leading a strike of 55 workers here in the area, who most of them overwhelmingly voted for the former guy. But we were out on that picket line fighting the righteous fight, having the conversations that I think working class folks need to have, and finding common ground. This idea that we're in our camps and we're not going to listen to each other or talk to each other. With all the strikes going on right now, to me, this is the perfect opportunity to, as I said, adopt a striker, get out on a picket line, and talk to each other. Actually talk to each other.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I mean, one thing I tried to say in that piece is that the labor movement itself is actually the kind of vision for the kind of politics that is the alternative, right, to this fake culture war cycle that we get trapped in, because the labor movement is something that not only addresses the deeper underlying problems that are the most important problems in America, like inequality and taking care of working people and building the middle class. I mean, A, the labor movement does those things, but B, the labor movement actually can change the electorate of America, because people who go through that process and the people that stand on that strike line, like you're talking about, people are seeing a democratic organization at work, and people are living politics in a way that they never will by watching CNN and Fox News. So, I mean, the Democratic Party in particular needs to understand that their fate is tied in to the fate of the labor movement in some really deep ways, and they need to act like it.
Now, let me ask you this, because one of the things that comes up because I talk about this quite often, is that, well, you're saying that certain issues are not important or nonsense, and they're important to some people. And I go, no, I'm not saying that they're not completely not important, but at the end of the day, we've got to figure out how we bring people together and figure out how to win elections and govern in a way that's going to make people's lives better. And then we solve all of the other problems. Are you afraid, or have you gotten any pushback from this idea? Because every time I say this, well, you're just an old white guy who's pushing economic, stuff that has made us unequal. Do you get any of that?
I mean, I get pushback from the right, on these things, but I kind of take that as granted. I mean, it's really like, I can't say it enough. These things are propaganda. I mean, these are not real issues. It's like people, I think, have a hard time thinking about politics because partly because of what they hear in the media. If you hear these issues talked about in the media, people feel like they have to form an opinion on them. People feel like they have to be the terrain that these elections are contested on. But, I really just want people to take a deep breath and use a little common sense and say, what are the really important things in this country that we need to focus on for humans to live and survive and thrive? And it ain't critical race theory, and it ain't arguing about what's in textbooks. It's basic life issues. And so let's start with the big issues and work our way down.
When everything is perfect, we can go to other things. I'm with you on that. But you look at this, and one of the things that they make sure that we don't do is pay attention to how bad things are. It's kind of that the shiny thing here, like a cat chasing a string.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this depends on, and this is not an easy issue. I mean, it's a complex issue because it's tied into technology, it's tied into the media, it's tied into how people consume what they think politics is, and how people form in their minds what they think important national issues are. And this is an ongoing thing that we're all dealing with in America, and a lot of it is contributed to us having Donald Trump, who was a reality show candidate. And for those of us in the media, I mean, what can we do? We can come out and try to tell the truth. So we have to just keep trying to tell the truth and getting people to listen.
That's why I think you guys are doing great jobs over there In These Times. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Hamilton Nolan. He's a labor reporter at In These Times magazine. InTheseTimes.com, I think the website, right?
Yes.
Make sure you check that out. We'll get links out on social media on how folks can check out the work that he does, especially this piece on how Democrats can get back to their working class roots. I did want to ask you about what's going on, since it is Strikes Giving. You saw the ratification vote with the workers in IATSE, the stage and theatrical employees. I talked with Alex Press yesterday on the program. There wasn't a lot of There seem to be a lot of unhappy folks with the ratification vote. What are you hearing?
I mean, absolutely. And Alex Press, great labor reporter. I mean, look, the fact is that IATSE is imposing a contract that their members voted against. I mean, that is there. You know, there's two contracts. One very, very narrowly passed the popular vote, and the other narrowly lost the popular vote. But because they use this electoral college style of ratification system, you know, their members voted, the majority of them voted against the contract, and they're getting the contract anyway. And that is after a 99% yes strike authorization vote. I mean, it's something that should never happen in a union. No union should impose a contract that a majority of members voted against, period. It just goes against the most fundamental principles of what unions are about. And so, I mean, I understand that this was the set of rules that IATSE had in place, but the only response for a union to have after something like this happens is to say, how can we make changes to that system right now to ensure that this never happens again?
Yeah.
Because it's the anti-democratic outcome. And it's really, really terrible to see that after the amount of enthusiasm the members put in going into that.
Yeah, I can't imagine that. This just kind of crushes all that. And I got to imagine that enthusiasm now changes from getting a better contract to throwing out the people who imposed this contract. At least if it were me, that's where my energy would be going.
I totally agree with you, you know, and I you know, we always have to make sure not to get too deep into telling other unions or members of other unions what they should do. It's obviously up to the members of those unions. But, you know, when I think about something like that happening in my own union, I mean, the level of rage would be off the charts. And I think that, again, like, the only response from the leadership of that union has to be, here's what we're doing to change this system so this never, ever happens again.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and my problem with it is, you know, as Alex explained yesterday, that they didn't deal with the core issue, and the core issue was, you know, time off, and a major safety issue, and that I think is a problem when you don't get the main issue. You know, and look, I don't want to go beating up on unions. That's not my job here. But at the end of the day, when you don't deal with the core issue, that's a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. And, you know, I mean, again, like the people of IATSE know what they will or won't take. But again, like when you see the amount of support they had going into that strike authorization vote, 90% of the membership voted in that and 99% of them voted yes. So you could not have had more of a mandate from your membership to do whatever it takes to get what they needed, you know, and now we look at where we are, man. It's just very, very disappointing to see an ending like this.
Yeah, but ultimately they still did, you know, better than they would have without having a union there. And this is where I fall back onto. They still did better than they would have otherwise. And now the recourse is we can organize, we can do something about it so that it never happens in the future. Where if they didn't have a union, well, it would have just been imposed on them.
Oh, absolutely. No question. No comparison to not having a union. And again, like not trying to tell any IATSE member what they should or should not do, but, you know, it really, the big picture of the whole labor movement, it just, you know, you would have really hoped for a better outcome than that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about, you know, this most recent piece, but, you know, did you see the John Oliver piece, which I think is fantastic on union busting?
Did, yeah.
Now every bit of it, you know, we've had on this program, we've talked about over the years, but he did a really nice job of pulling it into one 23-minute spiel, which I thought was fantastic, and every working person should watch because it was dead spot on accurate.
No, it was. I did see it. It was really good, and everybody should check it out on YouTube. And shout out to the Writers Guild of America East members who are on his writing staff also.
Yeah. Now, the reason I bring that up is you've got a piece out about the ACLU of Illinois. And look, a lot of progressive groups are trying to figure out how we can talk about being pro-union without actually being pro-union. And that's been one of my problems on the left for years, that they talk the game, but, well, when it comes around to, well, doing, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and as you know, there's been a big wave of unionization in the nonprofit world over the last 5 years or so. And the ACLU has had a whole bunch of union drives. Both the national staff of the ACLU is unionized, and also a lot of the state staffs of ACLUs have been unionizing over the past couple of years. And the story I wrote was about the union drive that's going on ACLU of Illinois, they asked for recognition in June. And since then, they've been in a fight with the management. And this is the ACLU. I mean, I think this is why this story really struck me and stuck with me. I mean, we're talking about the ACLU here. And they asked for recognition in June. They haven't got it. And management is trying to cut the unit size down by about 40%. So they're challenging 40% of the people and saying you're all supervisors or managers, which, as you know, it's just a common tactic. It's a common anti-union tactic. And, you know this as well as anybody. When you start covering anti-union campaigns, you see that every anti-union campaign is essentially the same toolbox. There's one toolbox and they just pull out whatever tools they can for that particular place. And here we have the ACLU of all places pulling out that tool of saying, how can we cut the size of this unit down as far as possible? And, these workers had to go to the NLRB. They had to go to the NLRB and file a 50-page petition with the NLRB just to get their unit. They haven't even had their election yet, and I think it's important for everybody to pay attention to this stuff, because if we can't hold the freaking ACLU to account, like where can the labor movement have a safe haven if not at a place like this?
No, and again, this is another example of why we need comprehensive major labor law reform in this country. It should not be this difficult.
Yeah, no question about it. And I mean, again, ACLU is a bunch of lawyers. And so to see the management of a place like that do it, and just a funny thing is when I asked the management about why they're doing this and challenging such a large percentage of the unit, part of their response was, well, we're doing this to help the workers because having all these supervisors in the unit would be bad for the workers, and that's probably one of the more patronizing statements I've ever heard from management. So
I thought they would have fallen back on, well, because we can.
Yeah, well, that's the real answer is because we don't want a union. So, but people who support the ACLU, I feel like should know that this kind of stuff is going on.
No, I mean, you look at these union busting campaigns, and right now I'm sure you're following what's going on at Starbucks up in Buffalo, where they just fired a woman, one of the pro-union workers there, and stripped her of her health insurance, and she's suffering from leukemia. I mean, what kind of a dirtbag company does that?
Yeah, it's real shady. And, it's really important that this stuff gets attention, and it's really important that people, pay attention to stuff and read these stories, because the only protection these workers really have is public opinion. I mean, at the end of the day, the NLRB is not going to save you from this. The NLRB is not going to save her from getting fired. The NLRB is not going to pay her rent. What these workers have in all these cases, whether it's Starbucks or Amazon or the ACLU, is the power of all of us putting eyes on it and saying, look, we see what you're doing and we don't accept it, and I really think that America as a whole, we need to get to the place where that kind of union busting is considered unacceptable. And is not seen as just another business tactic, but is seen as something that we really, really don't accept as a society.
And we hold them accountable for it. Hamilton, I appreciate you taking some time for it. Great work. Keep it up. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
Good stuff. Our good friend Hamilton Nolan. Make sure you check out his work over at inthes.com. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day the Screen Actors Guild voted to make all SAG members take an anti-communist loyalty oath. The late 1940s were the dawn of the U.S. Cold War with the Soviet Union. Anti-communist hysteria swept the nation. Hollywood became an early target of the communist witch hunt. Just a few days before the Screen Actors Guild vote, a group of screenwriters and directors, known as the Hollywood 10, men were called before the House Un-American Activities Committee. This group denounced the House committee's trial. For that, they were sentenced to a year in jail and then blacklisted. The anti-communist backlash had a chilling effect on Hollywood. Many in the movie industry were progressives, and some had actually attended meetings and other activities held by the American Communist Party. However, few of these movie industry people had actually identified as communists. The Screen Actors Guild attempted to head off continued congressional investigation by requiring union members to take a loyalty oath. Ronald Reagan was president of the Screen Actors Guild at the time it decided to implement the oath. Those who were blacklisted saw their careers disintegrate. Many screenwriters wrote screenplays under assumed names. One notable movie, The Salt of the Earth, was made by people who had been blacklisted. The movie was a true story about a 1951 zinc worker strike in New Mexico. The Hollywood Reporter declared the movie was made, quote, under direct orders of the Kremlin. Blacklisted writer Dalton Trumbo finally was able to write a screenplay under his own name thanks to actor Kirk Douglas. Douglas supported Trumbo to write the screenplay for the acclaimed film Spartacus. He insisted Trumbo use his own name. Sadly, far too many were not so courageous during the Red Scare.
Here they come again. That gaggle of Washington politicos and pundits who keep assailing Joe Biden's package of FDR-ish proposals that, at long last, would begin lifting up America's infrastructure and working class. Too big, screech these small thinkers and servants of the plutocratic order. Too costly and, well, too democratic. You would expect such adamant menginess from anti-everything Republicans, but these are Democrats. Well, sort of. They're Chicken Little Democrats, a subset whose members fastidiously call themselves middle-of-the-road moderates. Actually, though, you can almost always find them hugging the right-hand lane, clucking that the party of the people is scaring the people with policies that, get this, directly benefit the people. This was their excuse when one of their own political adherents, Terry McAuliffe, recently lost the Virginia gubernatorial election. It's their fault, cried the mods, claiming that poor Terry lost because progressives refused conservative demands to slash key Democratic reforms from Biden's infrastructure bill. They claimed that cutting progressive proposals from the bill would have made it more acceptable to Virginians. As one political columnist wailed, had congressional Democrats given voters a reason to turn out, that would well have made the difference. But wait, it's the job of the candidate to motivate voters. McAuliffe, a lackluster peer of the business-as-usual Washington power structure, ran a lousy campaign, basically assailing his Republican opponent for being a clone of Donald Trump. True, but besides not being Trump, what was Terry offering to grassroots families to excite them about voting for him? This is Jim Hightower saying, and guess what would have been a winning issue for him? That big progressive version of Biden's infrastructure bill. It happens to be very popular among the voters McAuliffe needed. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we've been talking about all week, it's National Apprenticeship Week. And look, with the Build Back Better plan, going to be lots of jobs, lots of work that needs to be done. And we need people who know how to do stuff. We need pipe fitters and iron workers and painters and bricklayers and candlestick makers. We need lots of people to do the work that needs to be done. And this is a great opportunity for people getting out of high school. It's a great opportunity for a lot of folks. And my next guest is one of the guys who just wrapped up an IBEW, an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers apprenticeship program. But he's got an incredible backstory. And this is while it's one story, it's replicated hundreds and thousands of times over across the country in these apprenticeship programs. That's why I've asked Marlon Anderson to come talk with us. Marlon, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. How you doing, Rick?
Congratulations on just wrapping up your apprenticeship program. I understand you were done much faster than the norm, so congratulations on that.
No problem about that. Yeah, it was just me being studious and taking some extra classes. And, it just happened to work out in my hand. It was never planned or executed, but sometimes things just happen and they happen.
Yeah.
You don't ask why, but hey, I turned out early and I graduated now. I'm a journeyman wireman.
And I understand, before we get into your backstory, you're getting married this weekend. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm getting married this weekend at the Reef in Long Beach. I hope to see you there.
So there's a whole table for me. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, hey, everything. I got the whole setup, man. I got the whole setup for you.
All right. Well, let me ask you this, because your story, from what I've been told, is an incredible one. Out of high school, you joined the military. Take it from there. What happened to you in the military? Where did this go?
Well, see, the reason I joined the military is because my father, he was an Army veteran, so I decided to join the Navy, so you can imagine all the back and forth we got in that one, just alone. But I went right after high school to, try to give some commitment to my country. I didn't grow up really rich. My dad was a single man. He raising 3 children. He was a union worker himself, was a union meat cutter. And I just want to have some opportunities. So I decided to be a hospital corpsman. And while in A school, I got hurt. I got a hernia and had to have a surgery. And afterwards, I wasn't able to perform the same. So because in the military, it doesn't always go as you plan.
Right.
And if you can't be there for the members out there in the field and do your job to the fullest standards, and I hate to say it, they don't want you. And,
Right.
and for all understanding, I get it. If I'm a corpsman and I'm expected to save someone's life, I should be in a tip-top condition. So I left the military, and after that, it was a kind of a hard time in my life. I just going up and down to jobs, and I actually got in some trouble. And I ended up going to state prison for 51 months, But while in state prison, I was able to fight fires up and down California. And I was able to work my way down to a firehouse. And I was able to fight fires in San Luis Obispo County. So I actually got a bunch of certifications, became a state certified firefighter 1. I got grants from certificates from the California Operation Emergency Services. But more importantly, I got the experience. And I got the experience of doing all that. And right when I got out of prison, it was in 2016, a couple weeks later, I became a sheet metal worker. So I was in Local 105, and I was just going through building trades. And one day, I ran into a guy named Justin Boiler, and I asked him how to get an IBW. And I was in the IBW apprenticeship 6 months later. Ran through the apprenticeship and just kept my head down. I was always trying to hold myself accountable for what I was learning. And I took it seriously because right now we need a lot of skilled trade workers out there. When you got people building stuff, man, it's really serious. I just got through working the Gerald Desmond Bridge. The actual president of the United States was on there. It's a bridge that goes over the Terminal Island in Long Beach. And I actually got to aim the lights on it. And what I got to say is that we got to have workers to build these things, because we have infrastructure that needs repair.
Right.
And the trades is a great idea. And I'm going to give you some numbers. I came in out of prison 51 months ago, 5 years ago. Now I had a job at $12 an hour, joined the apprenticeship at $16 an hour. Now I'm making over a 6-figure income just from doing a 5-year apprenticeship, And I was able to qualify to get my record expunged and just change my life altogether, And it was all just off me putting in my hard work, being patient with the program, and just being studious. Sometimes you just, honestly, I was just trying to take some extra classes.
Yeah, no, and having the opportunity. Look, I mean, sadly, in this country, you end up going to jail. That's almost a death sentence, because nobody's going to hire you. The fact that you were able to get into an apprenticeship program and head in that direction, to me, is an incredible story.
Yeah, and I mean, I got to work on some of the largest projects in California. I mean, the Quarry in the Pacific. I got to learn from different journeymen and build different things and see how things are built. And I learned that, having skilled craftsmen that build our homes and build our highways is very important, especially when it comes to rebuilding and repairing America, which we want to do. And there's plenty of opportunity right now for young men and women. And it doesn't matter where you've been in life or who you are or what you believe, we will take you in. If you want to learn and you join a brotherhood, and you'll have great benefits of medical, dental, vision, pension, annuity, community. There's nothing you won't have. There's nothing you won't have. It's a strong, and you live better. And so I can tell you honestly, the union changed my life.
I mean, this is the perfect story, Marlon, of what I've been saying for the longest time, of union job, better life. It sounds like, you worked hard, you were diligent, studious, you went to all the classes, you worked hard to do that. But at the end of the day, that hard work was still rewarded with a decent wage and good benefits and good retirement. It was rewarded with really good stuff. Whereas, a lot of people work hard. They're just not fortunate enough to have a union contract, and as you said, a brotherhood behind you to help push and make that a really good job.
Well, I think that's very important. You mentioned that, Rick, because we everyone should have a union. Every company in America should have a union, and we shouldn't concern about how much it costs or what it is, but you should look at the cost of healthcare. That's just the main one, and having that group benefits, how it works. I'm not sure about all the details, but 6 months later, out in the IBEW, I had full medical and dental, vision, and pension, like right 6 months in, and that alone is worth everything in this country. So I think that organizing and finding more members to join unions and creating unions is the future, and this also shows the employer that that we are serious. We're going to do our job right too, and we're going to do it with compassion. But in the meantime, respect our time, respect us as people, and pay us living wage so we can come to work comfortable and happy, because that way we'll do better work for you as well.
No, and let me talk about the apprenticeship program a little bit, because a lot of people don't understand what union apprenticeship programs are, because I think it's the best kept secret in this country. Now, you went through this program. What it cost you to get through the apprenticeship program?
Well, in certain areas of the country, it might cost you something, but over here in IBEW Local 11 in Los Angeles, we have the best apprenticeship program in the country. I paid $0, and I got free tools and boots.
Wow. Now that's good. I've never heard the free boots, but every time I talk to somebody about their apprenticeship program, the people going into it don't have to pay to get through it. And I keep talking to people, my own children, going, "Hey, become an electrician. You go through this apprenticeship program, and look, if you only do it for a couple of years, you have a skill that no matter what happens, you're going to be able to eat. It's portable, and they can't take it from you. To me, it is the direction to go."
It's the only way. I'm a journeyman wireman electrician. I can go do this anywhere in the world. They're looking for electricians. As long as I know the math, I have a general understanding of what they taught me in apprenticeship for 5 years. I could pass the state test. I can do it. I'm not worried about it. I'll go do it anywhere with anyone, and I'm also able to learn with different techniques. So it's a beautiful thing, Rick, and I want more people to know about it. There's all sorts of trades. It's not just electricians. There's plumbers, pipe fitters, millwrights, whatever you can think of. And America needs a lot of them right now.
I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Marlon Anderson. Marlon's a IBEW Local 11 apprentice, or just finished the apprenticeship program. If you want to know more about the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW.org is their website. There's information there that points you in a direction to your local IBEW local. Like I said, this is National Apprenticeship Week. Make sure you check this out. Marlon, I wanted to ask you, because you brought up, the president came and saw one of the projects you worked on.
Yeah.
I have friends who are in the building trades. I can't go down any street without them going, "Hey, I worked on that," and "Hey, I did that." There's got to be something to it when the president comes in and that you help build that thing that he's highlighting.
Well, he actually came to two of my projects since I was in the past year. As a matter of fact, he came to the Gerald Desmond Bridge, which is in Long Beach, California. He actually came to Long Beach City College. I actually went to a Bernie Sanders rally at Long Beach City College too. Want to point that out. Don't want to give a shout out to Bernie. But he came down there and saw the bridge that we built. And actually, the bridge was actually started and funded underneath the Obama-Biden administration, and it was finished actually around the time Biden took over too. And it still got some things. It's actually people passing over right now. Passenger cars. It has this lights. It has beautiful lights on it. I sent you a picture. It's a great piece of work, and it's something to really be proud of. It's all union built. They paid great wages on it. Met a lot of good brothers. It was a great project. Shimmick Construction did a great job.
Yeah, see, now you're just bragging. See, I thought it was one. You're showing me up. No, it was two. Now you're just bragging.
No, that's why. Yeah, no, the second time was he showed up to the job, and I was ready to get some work done. And then I got this song. It's like, President of the United States is coming to Long Beach City College. I was just like, I'm at Long Beach City College right now. So working the building trades, the president shows up. It's like, hey, I've been here so many hours. That's great, Mr. President. They got it because I should be here 6 hours. My contract says, hey, I had to get paid for 8. So I get paid additional couple hours. Remember that unions will take care of you and take care of your time. There's so many great benefits to it. It never, it's never ending. I'd also want to say I didn't get to shake Joe Biden's hand one of the times he came by, but I do see he's actually out there getting us work. So I do appreciate that.
No, and that's important. And the reason this week is important, this National Apprenticeship Week is important because look, this bipartisan infrastructure bill just passed. There's going to be a lot of projects that are going to need to be done. We need people who are skilled. We need people who can fix things and do the things that need to be done. And I know my union brothers and sisters in the building trades are much better trained, much more competent, and better than the rest of the industry. Which is why you hire union labor. Might be a little bit more expensive on the front end, but it saves you time in the long run. Because I look at the two bridges, the battle of two bridges between the one in New York, the Tappan Zee that was replaced, and that monstrosity out in California. One was done with all union labor under a PLA, and the other one was not. And the one that was not is probably never going to be finished because it was done with shoddy material and done by half-trained people. So it just seems very commonsensical to me. Use union labor.
100%. The Teamsters brought in the stuff for us. They brought in the material. The material had to be UL listed. One thing I did want to highlight, Rick, that I think that we have to mention is skilled labor. And the form skills, like you go through an apprenticeship through 5 years, you learn underneath this of a qualified journeyman, and you learn this kind of work so that you can actually go do it. And I say skill because that is very important. I learned from the IBW that skill, and I have a craft now. I'm not just an electrician; I'm a skilled craftsman. So it's levels to this.
No, it's extremely important to point that out. Because in this country, and maybe, I don't know how old you are, but when I was in high school, the idea that every kid had to go to college was, drilled into us. The only way you're going to get into the middle class is you go get a college degree. And what we've done over these 30 plus years is we've de-emphasized people who can fix things. The apprenticeship programs, the vocational programs, we've not had the same kind of value in work. And this is why I think, especially in this week, it's important to highlight the fact that you're actually doing really important work.
Yeah, Rick, and the point that you said about college. So here's a cool thing about the apprenticeship program. You actually get college credits for the apprenticeship program. So if you go do your undergrad, let's say a couple years of math, a couple years of English and science, and you finish that apprenticeship program, you can take it to any city, like any college, and get a 2-year degree with it. Long Beach City College actually has a program where once I take my transcripts over from the IBW, I'll have an associate's degree, and I can go get a college degree in construction management. So there is a college pipeline right there. The only difference is you learn the skill up front, and they pay you while you're learning. And so in the back end, you can actually afford to pay for college without all the debt. Yeah. If you decide to do that, and you still have the skill to do that, you can go to any college in the world or any college in the United States and go to any international hall and sign the books and take a call the next day.
Now, I want to go back to your time in prison because could you have imagined while you were sitting in that jail cell where you would be today? Could you have imagined being in this position?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, all I know is that I think that one of the things I've learned learning from someone else in the Army is adaptability. And the military really helped mold me to just kind of adapt the situation. But one thing I did was I stayed studious. And I was always told by people like, man, you don't belong, you're different, and I didn't understand because I was just trying to stay studious. I was like, let me take this opportunity to really figure out myself and who I am or the potential that I have, And I just kept my head down. And it wasn't I didn't have a super ominous time in there. It wasn't, really threatening. Maybe it was just good luck, grace of God, whatever you want to call it. But I took a lot of classes, and you know what? I did have an idea because I had a buddy in there, and he was a land surveyor. He's a party chief, and he told me, man, you're good at math. You should go try to be an electrician. And I remember one day a guy from IBW came in because they're doing a project at the prison, and he said, yeah, go sign for the apprenticeship when you get out. We don't discriminate at all. Next thing you know, I'm graduating Victoria subgrade. If you say, I couldn't have predicted that at all. But I can tell you, one thing I want to point out is that hard work always pays off. And you're going to have to sacrifice something, just remember this, the American hard work, just continue, put your head down, and that middle path between the beginning and the end and everything that comes with that is what's going to make you who you are in the end. So focus on the journey while you're in. That's why I call them a journeyman wireman, because I'm about to take a journey all the way through this, and at the end I'll be in retirement, you know, comfortably. But I think that's what's important. And when I look back at it, it taught me, I guess, maybe more discipline. It made me figure out a lot about myself, so I was able to get to the program seamlessly.
So what do you tell young people? What would you have told your 18-year-old self if you had the chance to go back and talk to yourself?
I would tell myself not to try to lift too heavy so I wouldn't get a hernia, so I can continue to fight in the war. In the Iraqi war, but that probably would have been a stupid idea. But
don't lift heavy stuff. Okay, I get that.
You know, and then I look back and I was like, I probably should have stayed in. But you know, I would probably tell myself to go look into an apprenticeship, man, and go look into finding a skill that you can never lose, because it's going to take you 3-4 years to get to an apprenticeship, and you can still be 22 and go to college. What's in 4 years you have a degree, or 2 more years if you go to construction management. It's all sorts of ways. So if I could do it all over again, I would definitely explore the apprenticeship option, and then also I'd probably look more into it in the military. I'm not going to say the military. I do think I learned a lot of good things in the military as well.
Yeah. So what do you tell an 18-year-old kid today? What's the elevator pitch to get people to go, hey, this is important. This is a good opportunity. The fact that you went from prison to 6 figures to me is kind of like the best. You know, there's a bumper sticker right there.
Yeah, man. What I told an 18-year-old kid, you know, is that you know, you don't got to decide your future right now, and you don't have to think about it. But if you want a good job right now where you don't have to necessarily be in someone's face all the time, and you're just not necessarily a people person kid, join a trade. You know, pick up something and be an electrician. Try it out for 3 years. Try it out for 4 years. See how you like it. Pick up being a plumber. And during that time, you're going to continue to get a pay raise. You're going to go from $16 an hour or whatever you're paid, and every 6 months you get a raise until you turn out. And next thing you know, you can say, hey, you can go decide whatever you want to do, but pick up a skill to learn something. That way, no one could take it away from you. And it's always in need. And you get to help rebuild America, because construction is the beginning of all jobs. Got the guys I know that build SoFi Stadium. They employed half Inglewood, or majority Inglewood, you know, and then more is getting built. So they're also creating jobs for people. So it's a beautiful thing. No,
it's a great thing. So let me ask you a last line of questioning. The more important part of all of this, you're getting married this weekend. Are you ready for that?
Absolutely. I mean, my fiance is a beautiful woman, and any woman that puts up with me has got to be a good woman, because I'm not easy.
I know that feeling.
I'll admit, you know, I'm not saying I'm always searching for perfection, but my fiance's been there in my corner, and ever since she's come in my life, things have gotten better. I wouldn't have got my meritorious upgrade without her. Just kind of you know, kind of getting me where I wanted to go. And people, what I'm saying about meritorious upgrades, I was actually able to finish my apprenticeship early. So normally I would have finished in April this year, and I'm done in November. So 6 months early, I advanced a full journey rate. But yeah, I'm ready for marriage. It's a commitment, but I'm a committed type person.
No, I can see that.
If anything you could do for me, my fiance was going to say, hey, if you could just give Bernie Sanders, give us a shout out, that'd be awesome.
I will give that a try. I wish you nothing but the best. Good luck in marriage. Good luck on that, and keep up the great work and all of that. And congratulations, man. Truly, congratulations.
Appreciate your time.
Good stuff, Marlon Anderson. You know, seriously, when I look at these apprenticeship programs, and I've talked about this, you know, for a long time. These are jobs that are family sustaining wage jobs. These are future jobs. These are careers. And as I've been telling my kids, you know, this is one of those things that once you get this skill, once you have this skill, they can't take it from you. So if you decide, I don't want to be an electrician for 20 years, you still have this skill. You still have something that, you know, something to fall back on. And as Marlon pointed out, you can go and, you know, take the credits on into college and all of that. I think it's a great thing. I appreciate Marlon coming on. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Hearing no objections, it is so decided.
UN Climate Summit ends with progress, compromises, and disappointment. Coal is down, but not out in new Glasgow climate agreement. Plus,
today, we're finally getting this done.
Joe Biden signs landmark bipartisan infrastructure deal into law.
All of those landmarks and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I mean, first vaccine mandates, and now Americans don't even have the right to die in a bridge collapse. This isn't the country my grandfather died for in a bridge collapse.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, it took an extra day or so and a lot of stress and tension and battles and last-minute changes, but they got it done at COP26.
Yes, they did. Exhausted negotiators from nearly 200 nations struck a deal in overtime on Saturday to work together to stave off the worst effects of climate change for current and future generations, despite last-minute attempts to water down the agreement. The Glasgow Climate Agreement clarifies key issues in the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement. There was major progress on a number of key issues, but nations did not agree on language that would push the kind of transformative action that scientists say is required to keep global warming to just 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. They finalized technical language on the most contentious parts of the rule book for implementing the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement on monitoring, reporting, verification, and a global carbon emissions trading market. But gaps remain on emissions, finance, and fossil fuel production. Nations agreed to accelerate the deadline for ratcheting up their near-term climate targets to next year rather than 2025 in order to close the emissions gap between where we are and where we need to be.
So they're all going to come back and do it again a year from now? We're going to have to go through all of this all over again?
Yes, and that is a good thing. New analyses show that achieving countries' short-term targets for this decade will still warm the planet a catastrophic 2.4 degrees Celsius, far above the 1.5 degree target. Here's UN Climate Chief Patricia Espinosa.
This is a question of the long-term survival of humanity on this planet. It's imperative we see more climate action this decade to achieve it.
Saving humanity is exhausting.
Some key takeaways. The agreement explicitly used the words fossil fuels for the very first time ever.
What?
Coal was literally down, but not out, after China and India, in a last-minute maneuver, successfully watered down language establishing a global phase out of coal. They changed it to a phase down.
26 years of climate conferences, and it's the first time one of their agreements includes the word coal or fossil fuels.
I know, right? Similarly weakened wording called for phasing out billions in annual government subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. On Monday, China defended its maneuvers, saying wealthy countries should stop using coal first and provide financial aid to developing countries to adopt clean technologies.
Isn't China a wealthy country?
They don't think of themselves that way.
I see.
Wealthy countries, which have historically added the most greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, agreed to double their contributions to a climate adaptation and finance fund to assist developing countries that are hit hardest by climate impacts. However, the U.S. and the EU blocked a proposal to pay developing nations for loss and damage.
Why? What are they waiting for?
They're afraid of being held liable for that loss and damage of the past several decades.
Oh, because we are liable for all the loss and damage of the past several decades.
Now, to be clear, the Glasgow Climate Agreement will not, and never was intended to, on its own, solve the climate crisis. And it is not enough to head off catastrophic warming. But major announcements at the summit, like global agreements to reduce methane and deforestation, a deal between the U.S. and China to work together to slow climate change this decade, and, of course, the writing now on the wall for the end of fossil fuels, moved many prominent scientists to offer cautious optimism that the world still has a chance. Finally, some good news for the U.S.
Today, we're finally getting this done. So my message to the American people is this: America's moving again. and your life is going to change for the better.
If America's moving again, don't ask me to come over and help pack.
President Joe Biden signed into law the bipartisan infrastructure deal on Monday, a $1.2 trillion package that includes $550 billion in new spending to repair the nation's roads, bridges, rail, transit, ports, and water systems, and increase clean energy, electric buses, start an EV charging network, and harden the nation's electric grid while all boosting climate resilience. It's the largest investment in infrastructure in decades, and the administration projects it will create millions of jobs over the next 5 years.
I'll take it. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, President Biden today sent a letter to Alina Khan saying, hey, you, chair of the Federal Trade Commission, I got a job for you. Gas prices way too high and no real reason for it. Maybe you might want to look into that. Maybe you might want to look into grocery prices. Maybe you might want to look at some of what I've been calling gouging for a very long time. Look, we have some structural issues, no question. There's some things going on. Pandemic did some stuff. Gonna have some problems. I think what's going on more than anything else, good old old-fashioned American gouging and opportunism. This is what our good friends, the capitalists, love to do to we, the working folk. But here to talk about if this is the case, or maybe it is. Maybe it's all about the supply chain being gummed up and all those truck drivers that we don't have. Here to share some thoughts, I've asked Andre Vanelli to come talk with us. Andre is the Vice President for Economic Policy at the Center for American Progress. Their website, americanprogress.org. Andre, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you, Rick. Appreciate it.
So, Joe Biden saying, hey, Lena, do your job. Start looking. Go.
Well, there's a lot of things to be done here with this situation. Of course, there's the supply chain and the trucks and the containers and all of that. But it's also true that we have been used to basically the companies using every moment they can to their advantage. You know, we have seen in the last 4 decades each gain in productivity that we have in companies, most of that money goes to the pockets of capital and very little goes to the pocket of labor. And when we see what's been going on these days, you see a little bit of that too going on, be it the price of gas, given the price of some basic staples that we need to buy. So there's a lot going on there in terms of antitrust. The antitrust people that look out for competition, good old-fashioned competition, is not really there anymore the way they used to be. Now there's a lot of corporate concentration, and that has been reflected on people not being able to bargain for wages, but also for consumers to getting the short end of the stick. And it shows these days, right? Because pockets are being pinched. It's a little bit harder for folks. The good news is that revenues in terms of income, in terms of wages, have also been going up. So it's a situation where both incomes and some prices are up at the same time.
You said a little consolidation going on there. You mean monopoly, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we've seen way too much consolidation, especially in healthcare, especially in consumer goods. I mean, I think we're heading into a lot of all the wrong directions without anybody really holding these companies accountable.
Absolutely. And healthcare and pharmaceuticals are a poster child for that situation. We pay basically the highest cost in the world, and we're not even in the top 20 in terms of health outcomes.
That's because we're Americans, damn it. We like to pay full price.
Well, I sure don't, and I think that the audience doesn't too. So there's a lot to be done on pharma, a lot to be done on health, distribution. I think that basically we have allowed ourselves to be more and more into these monopolies or oligopolies or situations where there, many towns are company towns. The company towns are back in many places in America, and that's something that is just not very healthy. We had an opportunity to be tougher on that, and I think that the president is going to try and do that.
Yeah. Sadly, I think the company town thing, it's just not a company town anymore. We're almost talking about a company country. You look at how big Amazon's gotten, how big Google's gotten, Facebook, these behemoths, that's almost like we can't rein them in at this point.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. But the thing is, the economy is also changing, right? We need to change to a greener, more ecological future. And I think there's a lot of potential also for cost savings, right? Someone made the calculation that if we enact all the things that the president's program has there, we would have $500 savings per family for the median family out there. $500 a year of energy savings. Isn't that great? I mean, because basically, if we're worried about making ends meet, we'll have to look at the big ticket items, things like college education, like health, like taking care of kids, or the energy situation. $500, it really adds up. So we have to go deep and look at the things that are really that matter in our pocketbooks, and those are the big ticket items, not the price of milk. Milk is important, but there are things that are a lot more expensive than milk.
No, you're absolutely right. And, I was just having a conversation with a friend here who was saying, my grandfather back in the 1960s was making like $6,000 a year. And if you go and you do the BLS calculator, the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator, it's like $60,000 a year he was making. But, the kids didn't get saddled with a lifetime of student loan debt. Their health care was much cheaper. You just rattle off all of these things that we're paying way, way too much for because we've privatized it. We've handed it over to corporate interests, healthcare being one of those big things. And this is what we get.
That's what we get. That's what we get. So we need basically a different deal here for folks, right? We need to make sure that we're back in growth, and we're growing 3 times faster than we used to. Nobody's talking about that, but it's really happening. Perhaps it doesn't feel that way, but all the numbers show that we're growing fast. But we have to make sure that ends up in the pocket of everyday people, working people, right? And that's something that hasn't happened in a long time.
No. Salaries
have been flat for a long time, and that's something that people feel because it's difficult to go to college without getting into debt. Everyone fears, showing up in the hospital because God knows what you're going to be charged, whether you will go bankrupt on that. Those are situations that need to change. They seem like natural, but they're deeply flawed. We have to change the healthcare system to get better for us, the educational system to make it more affordable. We need to be able to have kids that are not in poverty and they can go to school, and it's something that is reasonable in terms of pricing. There's a lot to be done here, Rick.
Yeah. And a big part of this is, of this Build Back Better plan, which is why I think this is so important, because it seems to me kind of a reset of the last 40 years of neoliberalism and supply-side voodoo Reaganomics, kind of a reset to what my grandparents' generation was able to do for their children, like we talked about, incredibly low college costs, decent health care at extremely low costs, the opportunities that just don't seem to be there today. This seems like the kind of investment that we need for the future for my kids and grandkids.
Absolutely. For our grandparents, it's all about the cars and the bridges and the roads. These days, it's all about people, in the sense that it's a knowledge economy. We are producing a lot of services, and we need to make sure that we're making the smartest use of our folks. So we need to invest in the internet broadband. We need to make sure that people can show up at work. And these days, there's millions of people who are stuck at home because of the kids, right? And there's no daycare, people taking care of older folks. Well, we have to make sure that if these people want to go back, they can afford to do so. That's how we're going to be able to go back to better times, right? When we make the best use of our productive capacity. And that means people on jobs. In order for people to be on jobs, we need to invest in them. And I believe that Build Back Better, it's a package that basically gets you there. It invests in people, and people today are the infrastructure of the 21st century.
Yeah, you're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Andre Vanelli. He's the Vice President for Economic Policy at the Center for American Progress. Their website, AmericanProgress.org. You can check out their most recent piece. President Biden's economic agenda will help life more affordable without adding to inflation. Now, we're trained like Pavlovian dogs to anytime we hear the I word to go, oh my God, it's horrible, it's horrible. Inflation is bad for some and actually pretty good for others. It's kind of a balancing act. Is it something we should be rabid about as we are?
Look, a few months ago, for decades, we were worried about the opposite, deflation, which is an actual problem. Now, because of COVID and these other situations that we talked about, it has ticked up. But it has ticked up not only here in the States, but in Europe and pretty much everywhere. Right? So people who are freaking out saying, look, it's what we did because of COVID here in the U.S. that inflation is going up. That's not true. Because in Europe, they didn't do all the stuff that we did over here to recover fast. And now they're recovering a lot slower than we are. We're going faster. And they still have inflation. So we have to be very, very careful with this idea of inflation. We have to avoid the hysterical reaction here, because if we start doing crazy stuff like moving interest rates up and all that, you know what will happen? We will throw the baby out with the dirty water, and we don't want that. There's a lot of good growth going. There's a lot of good increase in people getting jobs by record numbers, and folks at the bottom of the pay scale, they're getting very, very large increases in wages.
Yeah, finally.
That's something that it's a new thing. It's a new thing. Let's celebrate that.
No, that's a good thing. Finally, the wages for working people at the bottom finally rising up and everybody getting a little bit of bump. That's been something I've been calling for decades. But in this moment, especially as we're hearing all this stuff about supply chains and we're blaming truck drivers because they're not up to them. We need to go to automation immediately. As we're hearing all these calls, what I'm not hearing enough of is maybe instead of having everything shipped into the U.S. so it can be bottlenecked at the ports, how about we start making things here again? How about we reshore some of our manufacturing, create some jobs, getting the stuff that we need? Look, if you want more widgets and whatnots, how about you start making them here so we can ramp up production when the demand is there? How about that?
Absolutely. We have a tax system that actually favors people who create employment overseas, that ship factories overseas. Now, the president has achieved something very, very important very recently, which is an international treaty where most of the biggest countries in the world agree to have minimum taxes for corporations. And I know this is fairly technical, but what it means is that corporations will have much lower incentives to actually do that kind of stuff, send the jobs overseas. So we think that this reform that the president has secured overseas will allow companies to create more jobs here, which is part of the real solution here, right? Yep. We need to have the stuff that we need closer to us, preferably inland here. So that's something that they're working on, and it's an important solution for the longer term problem, because you never know, maybe we get some other terrible, God forbid, another COVID situation or something like that. We want to be prepared, right? We want to prepare like that, right? And the idea is that we need a lot of that economic activity here and the good jobs here in the U.S. rather than overseas.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said a second ago on energy costs. The average family, if we do the things that Biden wants to do in this Build Back Better plan, this socialist plan, all this commie stuff that they want to do,